Hello and welcome back. Today I would like to continue on with the story I was working on with my friend and mentor, who was a very gifted psychic healer and medium, who taught me so much, and I'll always be mentioning her in some of the videos I do, because she just left me with so many little ideas and thoughts that really helped me along in my journey, insights that I found. They just taught me so much. Now, this is the book we were going to write about her life and how she her gifts developed, and the things that happened to her. There's some odd things in this which you might struggle to accept actually happened. I would never question her. You know, I was her student, and she spoke her truth, and I don't doubt a word she said. So everything that's in this book, I believe, and all I'm doing is offering it to you as insights for you to think about, and you can choose to believe them or not. She's passed over now. I would think along the line she may come and communicate again with me from the spirit world, and that would be a lot of fun. She can tell me what she thinks of me sharing all her ideas in this draft book that we had together. So I'm going to just go for it and take from it what you will. I'm just going to share the memories and things that she shared with me. Okay, I might need my glasses. I think I will. This is us picking off after we stopped in a medium's journey, the early years. This is the later years. I knew what spirit were trying to do. I knew they wanted me to go out and try and prove, or at least preach, that there is another world. They had prepared me for it and supported me. Large numbers of people were coming to me now for readings, but equally as many people, from the very young to the very old, were coming just to spend time with me. They wanted to talk to me. They wanted to know how this happened to me, how I felt about it, and how I coped with it, and how I managed to carry on a normal life. It had become my mission to remind others of the forgotten knowledge that they possessed. Every mortal soul who comes on this earth is capable of seeing the truth for themselves. Hidden deep within all of us is the memory of previous lives, the memory of the other side. I would tell my students, there's not a thing I can teach you, but I will show you how to open the door. The pleasure of seeing the realization on their faces, the dawning of their understanding, and the knowledge coming to them was my reward. I do not mind being used as a messenger. I've always known that I was the messenger. I now realised that I was to be used as a channel for the masters to speak through, to give knowledge and enlightenment to the world. I would get angry when people said I was gifted. My reply was always, "Do you think so? What I can do, you can do too." I enjoyed trying to wake people up, not teach them, because I couldn't teach them anything. All I could do was take them on journeys and point this out and point that out, hoping that they would wake up to their spirituality. I used to question, how do I know they are doing this? I have had no teacher in this life, and yet I can take them to many places, many halls, many planes, through many vibrations, many houses, yet I have difficulty in my life because the names of these places that I know are not written in books here. When I use these names for places that the learned ones, the book people, give me weird looks. Bewildered, they say, "And where is that?" "Oh, you mean such and such a place." and I could never understand how I knew those things. I discovered the answer to this on yet another trip to hospital. I needed to have an angiogram carried out, where dye is put into the heart so that x-rays can be taken to see how it's working. I was given a sedative, and as they pushed me down to the theatre, I called on all my guides. I called for Paradima, Evorius, St. Michael, and even little Emma from years ago, and I begged them, please give me a good result. Give me an all clear, because if not, then my work is going to have to stop, because my family will not risk or allow me to take the risk of doing trance work. As they wheeled me into theatre, I could feel the drugs taking effect. The doctor said to me, "You're going to feel a slight pressure now, all right?" And I thought, no, I'm not. I'm getting out. Off I stepped, out of my body. I immediately became aware of the presence of all of my 4 guides. I was also aware of a 5th presence whom I didn't know. I was walking behind this person who was garbed in something like sackcloth, though of a very fine nature. I tapped them on the shoulder and said, excuse me, could you just..." But it was as if I were hushed until we reached a certain spot, and then the person turned to face me. It was a man. I knew he was all right, and I felt quite safe with him, realising that my guides would never have allowed me to be in this position if it were not correct. "Who are you?" I asked, and the reply came back, "Masai." As it was spoken, I had this feeling of a tribe, a Masai tribe, and the next thing I knew, I was standing on the top of a mountain with Masai looking down, and people were coming forward. It was a scene that was being shown to me, and I've since found out that the images were of the Masai tribe, tall men over 6 feet with unusual hairstyles. I'm being shown this, a previous life by Masai. As the people come up, they were looking up to Masai with great reverence and respect, and I looked to Masai as if to say, "Good." Then Masai said, "Look deep into my eyes." As I did this, I blended into him. I just sunk into his body. The greeting went on, and I and Masai walked down the hill as one. As fast as this had begun, it was over. I had merely seen a flashback of a previous life, and I was very proud to have learned that I had once been a respected member of the Masai tribe. Then the scene changed, and I found myself lying on a bed on silky soft material that I could not describe. I could not really say that it was silk, nor what the cloth was like, but looking down I saw very brown legs, and on my feet were golden slippers. Pure gold, but soft gold, and I heard a voice saying loudly, John D. I lazily pulled myself up off the bed and walked through a door. I was very young, slim and dark, with very long hair. And as I walked into this room, I saw an incredibly aged gentleman. His hands were so wrinkled, his face so wise. I knew I was in a presence which had to be respected, and I knelt before him. "Come out here with me," he said. He rose with a youthful spring and moved so swiftly in a way which would not have been possible for a man so old, and I realised that the lines were merely symbolic of his age and his wisdom. I hurried to keep up with him. I could hear the pat, pat, pat of my little gold slippers on the floor. I knew then it was time for learning, and that I was probably his youngest apprentice. As we entered a room on the left-hand side of the hall, I was shown everything I had done wrong in my previous lives, and my heart sank. It was shown to me in a manner which was not in a book, nor on camera, but I was aware of it, and I felt that my heart sank each time, and my spirit sank along with it, as it was pointed out the mistakes I had made. He then took me to the right-hand side of the room and showed me all the things I had done correctly, and like an eager little child I said to him, "Do they match even?" And with kindness on his face he said, "Not quite. Maybe in another life I will make them balance even." He placed his incredibly wrinkled hand on my face and said, "Now we learn." I recalled how I had recently been questioning the spirits about how I knew the things I did when I had never read books. I now know why. I do things naturally. Why I know all these places and can do what I do. I am not gifted, but I bring with me a training in the occult from a previous life. I know that I have previously been burnt at the stake, although I don't feel I was a witch. I do know this: you cannot in one life learn all there is to know about spirit, so you must have many lives before you're finally tuned into the higher realms. Just as you open a door and think, "This is it," and you're pleased with your success, another door opens and blows your mind. Over the years, I had made many trips back to my spiritual home, but one in particular stays in my mind. I was alone in my own front room one Thursday evening, meditating. Sitting in my chair, I closed my eyes, and on lifting my face, I felt a spiritual rain. As each drop touched my body, I felt it revitalise my spiritual body, which slowly began to stir. I felt myself rise out and immediately, like a homing pigeon, strike out for home. I pushed like a swimmer, soaring upward through the clouds. Then everything became bathed in golden light. I slotted into a shaft of light, and I found I no longer needed to push. I was being carried along on a spiritual movement. And as I passed through the shaft of golden light, and as the earth plane grew further and further away, I started to see various people whom I recognised, but couldn't quite put a name to. They nodded at me and encouraged me on my journey. After a long time, I started to feel a little apprehensive. I tingled all over, and I realised I'd gone through a vibration. I began to feel lightheaded. I saw a plateau and landed on it. It was in a beautiful garden. The flowers were silver, and as the breeze rippled through the garden, they took on the shape of bells and played the sweetest music. I rested for a while and then was aware of someone coming forward. They were holding a cloak in front of them, making it impossible for me to see who it was. I slipped into this cloak, which was of a beige colour, neither white nor brown, but rather somewhere in between. It had no fasteners or belt, but instead draped, and the drapes overlapped each other. A lady came forward and called me on, and she was dressed in the same kind of gown that I was. She had very, very long blonde hair, and strangely, I had very, very long dark hair. She took my right hand in her left hand and pulled me forward. I know she was one of my spiritual sisters because I know the conversation went like this. "You cannot see before you are cleansed. Let me take you to the fountain of life." And in front of me appeared the most beautiful fountain. It was really more of a waterfall cascading down the side of a mountain. But there was something different about the water, and as I dropped off my robe and stepped underneath the cascade, I felt cleansed, utterly, right through to my soul. I saw all my life on earth, all my disappointments and my imperfections washed away. I saw my anger and my feelings and my emotions being cleansed. Then I was on the move again. I put on a new robe, which this time was an indescribable shade, similar to the haze which you see when you screw your eyes up and look at the sun. When I slipped on the robe, I felt like I was donning a dress which I had been long accustomed to from before, and it fitted me like a glove. It belonged to me, and I felt it was not so much a robe as a mantle. I turned and walked onwards with the lady, and she led me into a beautiful cathedral, and I met with my spiritual mother and father. And standing off to the right-hand side was my father from this life, who had passed away all those years ago. And he smiled, and I thanked him for being with me in those formative years. And he nodded to me as if to say, I did my job, and I was proud to do that. I was led to a large table and shown to a seat. Everyone then left the room, and another gentleman entered. He put his arms out to me and cupped my face, and all at once I remembered that once before in a previous life I had returned at the same crucial moment in that incarnation, because I had despaired, but that time I had been a male. As he placed his hands on my face, he transferred this knowledge to me, and I realised that each time I reached this stage in my new incarnation, I faced the same stumbling block. And this time, yet again, I had returned. Although rebuking me very kindly, I realised that I had probably returned at that stage in my life many, many times. He realised, and I knew he transferred his feelings to me, that I had taken on an awful lot. The strength that I received from his hands and his love, which was pushed into me in the only way it can be. He recharged my batteries, and with a spiritual kiss, he led me to the door and gently lifted me into the stream which was running all the time alongside my journey. The stream was running downwards, but I knew I had to push upward in order to go forward. Then the scene changed, and I found myself in a large marketplace. I felt a little afraid, but I thrust my way forward as the vendors tried to show me their wares. They were shoving snakes in my face, although I knew that they were offering me wisdom, because the snake is a sign of wisdom. I just knew I had to go on. Just as I was beginning to despair that I couldn't get through the place, a man appeared. He was very tall, solidly built, and dressed in a long dark cloak. I couldn't see his face. It was hidden from me, but on his left-hand side, clasped to his body, was a long sword, and I knew that it was to protect me. And as I moved forward then, he put his arms around me and passed me along the road. Then he turned and, opening his arms wide, held back the crowds that I had just escaped from. My heart ached to stay there, but he shook his head and pushed me on, and I came down and down and down. And I woke up in the chair and felt renewed. I knew I now had the strength to continue my work. There seems to always be something different happening in my life. It's as if they're trying to teach me everything in such a small amount of time. At the moment, I'm very much involved with channeling. I prefer to call it direct voice. Almost as soon as I put on any meditation music, my face immediately starts to turn to stone. My lips are still pliable, but they are overshadowing me, and I feel as if they are trying very hard to come through. On Thursday evenings I do healing, and from being a very small child I have been able to look at people and not only know if they were ill, but also where they were ill. Other people questioned it, and I could never explain how I knew, but now I can. I realise that there are spiritual wheels in the body, and they have different coloured lights associated with them. And when I look at a person, I can see which colours are showing and which are blocked. Where there is a blockage is where the sickness is. I would ask the person to close their eyes and tell me the colours they see. Then I would know which areas to work on. It's very simple, really, very effective. I'm looking forward to treating really difficult cases. I have some with ME, some with MS, blind and deaf, crippled with arthritis, very complicated cases, and I'm already achieving some success and getting tremendous satisfaction from it. I'm seldom lost for words, but confess to feeling dumbstruck when one day, whilst doing readings at a psychic fair, I was introduced to a rather insignificant looking Chinese gentleman and told through his assistant that Master Chan wished to speak to me. I told him he'd have to wait till I'd seen the other people waiting, which he did. And in the end he came over and bowed in the Chinese manner, and he said, "Why do you let your body go, but your head stays?" I was surprised because very few people catch me unawares, and I replied, "Maybe I don't know how to let my head go." A big beaming smile came over his face and he handed me a card. On it said, "Master Chan, Manchester." I put it in my bag and promptly forgot about it. It was nearly 3 years later that I understood what Master Chan meant. He knew I was only working on the lower 4 chakras. I was not using my throat chakra, my third eye, or my top chakra. Then they opened, and a surge of energy shot through my body and came right out the top of my head, so strong I actually set on fire. It scared those around me out of their wits. My husband panicked, my best friend nearly had a heart attack, and I took it all in my stride because I knew it was sheer energy. I never really believed for one moment that I could go totally up in flames. We did what we call earth workings, trying to ground me, trying to earth me back, which succeeded. And while this power was surging through me, the blue light which had been flickering at the back of my eyes, which I had been told related to my new guide, was bursting forth. And then the blue light that I could see at the back of my eyes started to force itself out. You can believe this or not, the only problem was I had no control over it. I couldn't raise it at will or project it at will. This is when I realised that the white light which was shooting out from my solar plexus, which I thought was merely in my mind's eye, was actually doing this, shooting out, and I have witnesses to this. I realised then that the lights I had been seeing, all the colours, red, orange, silver, yellow, green, blue, indigo, they were the spiritual chakras in my body, and they had opened. Now this is something that yogis practice over many years, to see this light within themselves, but very few, at least that I know of, actually until this time could make that light come out of the body at the point. Knowing in my heart and accepting without question that this was very powerful, I just strived and strived in meditation to create this blue light behind my eyes to project out, because I knew in my own heart that it is a healing light. I started reading books, although I had never read books or had the need or desire to read a book before. I started to plough through Blavatsky, Crowley, Mathers, Edgar Cayce, trying to see if they spoke of or knew of a blue light. And I found out that all martial arts experts and all yogis know of the blue light, but they do not speak of it radiating out of the eyes or the solar plexus. So I decided that possibly they did not know of this radiating, and I was beginning to think at this point that I was the only person in the world who had it. Not knowing what it was, I didn't know what to do with it, and then Spirit gave me the answer. Instead of the usual young girls who came through my door each day for readings, curious to learn when they would get married or whether their partner would return, if they were going to have a baby, I began to see sick people coming through the door each day. Very, very sick people. And they came for readings, but I found myself telling them to come back on Thursday evenings and I would try and help them. I now work hard to raise this blue light on Thursday evenings, and I'm learning how to project it properly. Together with a young healer called Fred and a lady called Adele who practices psychic surgery. Throughout this time, I had been talking to as many experts as possible, asking them if they knew about a blue light, and mostly they looked at me blankly or with disbelief. Eventually, I went to see Master Chan in Manchester, and when I asked him if he knew of a blue light, he said, yes. I asked him, but do you know about when it comes out of the eyes? And he said, of course. I can bring it out of my eyes and I can drop a man at 20 paces. And I thought, well, what's the good of that? I arranged to meet with Master Chan once a fortnight to learn how to control the blue light. As arranged, I arrived in Manchester 2 weeks later to meet with Master Chan, and my husband came along for moral support, and together with some other Chinese men, we followed Master Chan out into the countryside. The drive was very long, over 3 hours, and we were all slightly apprehensive when we finally arrived at a little stone cottage out in the wilds. There was no heating in the place, and the windows were wide open. The furniture had all been piled in one corner, and there was a simple altar in the centre of the room, covered with Chinese mantras and various symbols which I did not recognise. There was also a statue of a man with a monkey's face. There were some items of fruit on the altar, which Master Chan cleared away and replaced with fresh fruit. He made various bowing movements to the altar, stamping his feet and lighting incense sticks, and the smoke from the incense mingled with the cold fog, and I began to feel very cold. Then the Master called us forward one by one, and I was the last to be called, being the only female there. He drew mantras on our hands and performed various rituals, and then he drew his hands and, pointing with 2 fingers, he threw out his psychic power. Big, fully grown men were buckling at the knees and going down like stricken cattle. The first 2 went down at the first blow. The third one needed 2 strikes, and then his hand came out and he waved me to the floor. I refused. "No, thank you," I said, and I looked across at my husband, and he was shaking his head and pulling his face, obviously very worried for me. And I looked at the men on the floor who appeared to be in a frenzy. I saw their various inner personalities being released, but it was their lower personalities. The Master was sparring with them, and I realised that he was going through their personalities to bring out the higher personality so he could communicate with them. Again he beckoned me to the floor, and this time it was as if an invisible hand from the back pushed me, and I was suddenly on the floor. And I saw a look of alarm on my husband's face and whispered to him, "It's all right." And he relaxed a little then. I put my hands in a passive position, and all around me on the floor the men were still in a state of frenzy. The Master blew his psychic power at me. Nothing happened. He blew again, and I felt a slight tremor on my right leg, but otherwise was unaffected. Master Chan then proceeded to direct blasts at me, over and over, perhaps 20 times. He tried from every direction, and I could feel his fingers looking for a weak spot, and I realised that my own protective energy wouldn't drop down. I tried to drop my defences. I was not trying to hinder the man. I was there to learn. But something inside of me appeared to be stronger than what the Master was throwing at me. And this went on for a long time, until in the end I began to get very, very cold, and I heard my voice say, "Master, why are you making me so cold?" And I'm not sure he understood me, as his English was not very good. I opened my eyes and I looked at my husband, who later told me, "When you opened your eyes, I saw these 2 beautiful blue eyes shining out, and I knew Evorius was in, and I knew you would be fine." The Master came round in front of me. Oh, it's lovely energy here. And realising that I was transfiguring around the eyes, and also realising that there was a spirit inside, he attempted by waving his hands across the front of my face and blowing in my face to draw the spirit out. The only thing that came out was my temper. It took me all my strength to hold back the urge to yell at him. I felt my right hand rising up, and I knew if it ever came across and took hold of his shoulder, I would throw him across the room. Now, I am a weak female, and I only stand 5'3". The Chinese Master was small, but not that small, and this surge of strength within me was quite incredible. Evorius was playing no games that night, and in the end it was I who opened my eyes and shook my head to try and save the Master's face. And finally the Master accepted defeat. Just before we were about to leave, he asked me to return at a later date. I asked if he would give me healing on my right hand because I had been having a lot of problems with my thumb. And the master explained he could not give me healing. He could not give healing to someone whose higher immortal, his words, was bigger than his own. I realised that was a compliment, and he'd reluctantly paid to me. I promised to return, but unfortunately a week later I was suffering from pneumonia. Funny that, because a member of my group had insisted that I did not need to see the master and had told me he will draw strength off you and it will attack your chest. He was right, and the pneumonia took me over, and I was too ill to go anywhere for a long time after that day. For years, excuse me, I think sometimes when I'm reading, I am channeling a little bit and it affects your throat chakra. For years and years, I had been trying to get a psychic centre up and running. I was so tired of holding my meetings in restaurants on the promenade and teaching students or hosting healing sessions in my own home. I had been striving to get a property for years. In early October 1989, a lady came to see me for a reading, and as soon as she walked through the door, I was struck by the distress on her face and the pain she was suffering. It transpired that she had lost her son recently. He had died in a fire. She had been devastated by his death, as he had been her only child, and she had lost her husband 10 years before. She felt she no longer had anything to live for and was searching for answers. I was able to give her some comfort when I described the young man who appeared beside me, as she instantly recognised her son Paul. We kept in touch, and at a later reading I saw that she was selling up and moving property. She confirmed that this was true, and then she startled me by offering me her son's house to use as a psychic centre, to help other people like her who were battling the grief of losing a loved one. At first I refused because I knew there would be little or no profit for her, but she insisted she didn't want Paul's death to be in vain. She invited me to come and see the property, and if I felt it was wrong for us, then we need not proceed, but if it felt right, she wanted to donate it to us. Now this lady was not rich by any means. She'd worked hard for everything she'd got, but she was willing to turn that house over to people suffering the same grief she was. After much thought, I decided, yes, this is to be. We can start here. And thanks to Paul and his mother. I felt very nervous when I telephoned her. Yes, okay, we'll go for it, but on one condition only. It is to be called Paul Duxbury House. And she said, "Oh, Paula, I'd like that." So out of pain came comfort to many. Each day I worked hard and my skills improved. I was constantly learning new things about the spirit world, and each answer I was given sparked dozens of new questions. And one day, after there had been several deaths in the family, I asked for an explanation. I wanted to know where they had gone, and Emma showed me. She explained it to me as follows. When a baby is born on this earth, it comes through a long dark tunnel, and once it comes along this dark tunnel, it emerges into a bright light and doesn't know a living soul. It is bewildered. It doesn't know who it is because it's been in the womb for 9 months, cushioned in darkness. Families step forward and love it and nurse it. Mum, dad, brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, grandma, granddad, all in the body. When you die, you go through a long dark tunnel and you emerge into a big bright light. And guess what happens? Families come forward and pick you up and nurse you and comfort you until you adjust to being on the other side. Mum, dad, brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, grandma, granddad, all out of the body. Then there are sudden deaths and there are sudden births, and we can get complications in that direction. I have seen people on the other side who have had sudden deaths, and they cannot really believe they are dead, and they wander around quite confused. Tremendous relief comes to their faces when they realise that you can see them. They say, "Can you see me?" And you say, "Yes." And they say, Thank God for that. You have to say to them, you're dead. And the look on their faces is astonishment. And then they reply, I'm not. Really? Am I? I have seen this many times and I take it in my stride now. When my husband and I are having a drink at the bar, there will often be an extra gentleman sitting there, and I'll look around the pub and say, you must remember this man, and I'll describe him, and someone will say, yes, that's old Richard. He used to be here every night, but he's been dead for 10 years. Obviously, old habits die hard. When I'm talking to people in body, they, the spirits, sit and listen to the conversation, and they smile and I smile back, and they're not out of place, they're not intruding. They don't do any harm, so why be frightened of them? And why send them away? Spirits are always glad to see someone go over, you know. They love to welcome them back. They get very upset when one comes in body. To them, it's almost as if that person has died. They are sending one of their spirit, one of their loved ones, here to do a life on this earth. And that person is going to go through all sorts of things, not all good experiences either. And they are very worried for them. And it's just the same when someone dies here and returns to spirit. We're very worried about them. And the first thing we say is, oh, I hope they'll be all right. Spirit welcome them over there because they're pleased to see them. To us they have died, yet Spirit welcomes them because they have survived a life on this earth. Doesn't that sound funny? It is a trial to come into body. There are souls in spirit, very wise souls, who actually ask to come here just to have the experience of being in the body. And there are others who keep coming back time and time again just to get it right. And sometimes I would ask, why am I here? And they would always reply, you are the messenger. No more, no less. The messenger. I'm afraid that's where it ends. It's quite a life she had. That's just a fraction of her experiences and the things that she did when she was here and the lives that she touched. I seem to remember Paula telling me one time that, you know, your legacy, you know, when you go back to the spirit world, the book doesn't close there and then on that life. The people you helped, the love that they send, the kindness that they think when they think about you, each time a thought like that comes, it's like bonus points up in the spirit world. And the same is also true if you harmed people and hurt people and, you know, did some sort of wrong to people and they have anger and low feelings about you, that will all be added up in the spirit world too. So it goes on and on until those, you know, the ripples in the pond from your life play out, you know, and then it's all assessed at the end. But I always like to send my thanks and appreciation to the people who have helped me along the road and the wonderful lessons they've taught me. And now I'm seeing conversely that, you know, there's real thanks as well to the people who seem to have harmed us, triggered us. We don't have the clearest picture here in earth, so I'd say bless and, you know, forgive all people on your path and wish them well. And it will be very interesting when we all join up on the other side to compare notes and to see how we did this time around and if the piles match even or not. I'm going to leave you there because I know that was quite a long video. I hope you enjoyed it. I have no more of Paula's story, so take what you can from that. It's just a pity we didn't time to finish the last chapters of her book. Okay, I'll leave you then. God bless and take care of yourselves. Speak again soon.